Okay, so this is documenting the EJ22 NA to turbo conversion. I've done the swap once before. I guess you can almost swap it. Basically, the EJ22 Phase 1 is probably the best motor for this. The Phase 2 can be worked with as well, obviously, but I've never done the Phase 2. I just know that the Phase 1 is kind of more bulletproof in that regard. The first time I did this, I did it on a 95 Phase 2, which had the dual port exhaust heads, which made everything easier. You can use the WRX stuff. You just have to notch the turbo or the cross member to make room for the WRX Uppipe. Things got a little bit tight, and I'll show you some tips and tricks that helped me along the way with that. I have a bunch of people messaging me from like 3 or 4 years ago that saw my build, and so it's just easier to kind of document this as I'm doing it again, and just for my sake and for other people's as well if they go and do this. So right now, I'm doing this on this is a 1997 EJ22. So this is still a Phase 1, but it is single port exhaust heads, and this is also an interference motor. Not that that really is a huge issue. A non-interference motor like the 95 was just, didn't make me worry as much. The timing belt could snap, and I wouldn't have to worry about valves, getting bent or anything like that. Not that the timing belts really snap on these quite frequently or anything, but it's just that peace of mind. Okay, so we'll go over what I've done so far just to get ready for the turbo build, then like some tips and tricks along the way that would be helpful. So as you can see first, this right here, cone filter. The stock gearbox that came with it was kind of cracked, and I was a little bit worried that extra air was coming in besides what was being filtered. So I just actually put this in preparation anyway. It actually sounds terrible on normally aspirated or naturally aspirated a vehicle with all these resonators. It sounds just like a vacuum. When I turn the car on, it sounds terrible, but that's again just in preparation for. The other thing is you'll see this like 15 feet of hose, like 5 feet of hose back here. That's coolant line. So basically the thing you can do in preparation. So this is the heater hose that would go back to the heater core. So it would go from here, where my finger is right here, to right here. But I just cut that in half and then put one adapter in here and then one adapter on the other side, and then put in 5 feet of hose that kind of use around. And the reason I did that is because when I put the turbo in, it's going to sit about right here, and then I can just slice this right here and then put one end in the inlet and one end in the outlet for the turbo. So that'll be all ready. So that's coolant. The next step would be oil. So with oil, you can see this is in stock. This is the typical entry point for gauges or for oil feed. So right down there, that's where the oil pressure sensor would be on a stock vehicle. You can just disconnect that. It goes off at 2 psi, which is pretty much worthless, because if it goes off at that point, your motor's pretty much shot unless you stop pretty much immediately. So, okay, you can see that this is a T here. That's kind of, I have it blocked off. That's going to be the line that goes to the turbo. This other line that's actually going back into the driver compartment, that's actually for a mechanical oil pressure gauge. And the reason I'm using mechanical there as opposed to electronic is because I had 2 electronic oil pressure gauges, and they both read extremely low at idle, to the point where I was kind of like scared. It was running like, one ran 0 psi at idle, but while the car was while I was driving, it read 60, 80 psi. The other one read 2 psi at idle. One was a glow shift, which understandably so, that's why I read 0. And the other one was a Pro Sport actually, which is not top of the line, but I think middle of the road in terms of like gauges, and that was a 2 psi at idle. So I actually replaced the oil pump and the oil pickup and the oil pan. See down here, got a light on it already. You can see that's a WRX oil pump. Try to get better focus here. It's a WRX oil pump, and the pan is brand new. That's a 10 mil oil pump, so you don't really need to. You don't really need that. It's kind of overkill. But I just replaced that because the oil pressure was so low and I was kind of nervous. So I replaced that and it's still red. Both those gauges, one read 0, I tried both, and the other one read 2. And I bought a cheap mechanical, like a Bosch mechanical oil pressure gauge, and now it reads 16 psi. So it was definitely just the senders. I don't want to have to deal with that. So I know mechanical is just going to read a little bit better. You have the issue of oil going into the car, but if you're using, again, like a stainless line, like a braided line, you should, that should set your mind at ease as far as, oil like leaking into the car in any way, shape, or form. So that's the catch-22. Oil's going into the car, but it's accurate. So that's what I prefer. Okay, so that's oil going to the turbo, oil coming back from the turbo. How do people do this? So there's a couple different ways to do this. Let me get the light. There's a couple different ways to do this. The best way is to go into the pan. The best way by far to go into the oil pan. I just replaced the pan. To be honest, I'm being lazy. You should go into the pan. On my previous build, I went into the valve cover first and then eventually went into the pan. Just when I was already replacing things, I just said screw it and replace it while I had the motor out. I'm not taking the motor out right now, so it's just easier right now to go into the valve cover, and then if I go to take the motor out, I'll put it in the pan because it's a pretty simple process. Once you have the motor out, you can do it without the motor out. It's just really hard getting those 4 bolts. And you got the torque spec is like 4.7 foot-pounds, so you can easily screw those up. You just don't crank away at those because they'll break. So right now, let's put some light on this. Right now, I have brass fittings into the valve cover. So most people will put, I've seen a lot of people on YouTube or forums putting fittings into the valve cover. They're worried about hitting valve trim components, so they don't know where to go and how deep to go. And B, which I'll show you where to go. I have an extra valve cover over there. B, they only put either they put it up here because there's more room, or they put it right here and they just put like a nipple on the end. So they would stop with this. The reason I have 3 pieces here, actually 1, 2, 3, and then the nipples on the end, so 4, is because I prefer to have the brass do the bend for me as opposed to the rubber hose that could possibly kink as you go around. So I mean, I don't want that to kink and then oil to actually stop flowing and blow the seals of the turbo. You can see right here that I have a hose going right now to it, and it's just kind of capped off. But eventually that hose will go down from the turbo into that right there. Be if anything, a slight bend, mainly straight. So let me show you on this where I have this actually going into. So here's a valve cover. It's a spare. You can pick these up for dirt cheap. I picked the one that's on there right now. This is a stock one. I picked that one that's on there in the car now for, I think, $8 or $10 on eBay. So I went in right here. You don't have a lot of room. You're going to have more room to do it right here, but I didn't want to have to travel as far. It's kind of harder to get the valve cover on if you do it here, but it doesn't have to travel as far. That's up to you. You can do either one. And plus, you to make that bend, you would have to do more brass fittings, or you bend those yourself if you went further up. So where you can go is these little buttons right here. These buttons are already kind of elevated anyway. You can kind of see. So that's where I go in. I will drill a hole directly on that button, and you can go. If you take this here, you could go 3 threads in. That's as far as I've gone. I haven't gone any. Waiting for the camera to focus. Apparently, it's just not. You can go about 3 threads in, so right about where my thumb is, into the metal before you you may be able to go in further. I haven't had any issues with it hitting valve train components. You would hear it. When you took off the valve cover, you would also see it in terms of the brass. Yeah, it's just not. It's not gonna happen. The other piece that, because people I see all the time go into this part, go into the vent for the valve cover. I strongly recommend you don't do that. There are people I've seen how-to videos. People are yeah, I've done this for years. I'm sure you could. You probably could do that, and it could work. but the odds of failure are much higher going in here than going in here, because with the turbo, it's going to be like right here, and then where it's going to come out about right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back up with the hose and then back down again, and this is gravity that's forcing the oil down. So you're making the oil work extra hard to go into that. I mean, and you have to worry about kinks, and plus this is a vent. There's a vent for a reason. You don't want to eliminate that vent and shove oil into it. You could do that. It's just I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, I've been known to cheap out and half-ass things, and I won't do it. So that should say something. Okay, so let's go into, that's the oil and coolant setup for this. Two very important pieces. A lot of people don't go into that in too much detail, but that's a couple things there. Now let's go into the intercooler turbo tips and tricks. First, we'll get this intercooler on down. Okay, first thing. Here we go. 06 WRX intercooler. Please get this. Do not get an 02 to 05. They can be had for pretty much free, but they're much more difficult. They're going to jam up against the firewall. Anytime you go to move it, it's going to be pretty much impossible to get it in there. Some people have you don't even think about AC. Like, you're not going to have AC with an 02 to 05. Like, if you do, you're going to have to seriously bend some stuff to get it to work. This is an 06. 06, 07 WRX intercoolers work great. There is a Forester one that will work as well, but only certain years. And the reason being is because the blow-off valve is slightly slanted. And with it being slightly slanted, you're going to have throttle body issues, which I'll show you in just a second. You want an intercooler that looks like this, pretty much the 06 WRX one, but with the blow-off valve, the bolts, just look at the bolt holes, straight across. If it's like going like a little bit of an angle or an angle like that, you're going to have an issue. I mean, I guess if you use an aftermarket blow-off valve with like an adapter that brought it out to here, you may have less of an issue, but I would recommend using the stock blow-off valve. Venting to atmosphere, because you're not going to have room. You can make it work with venting back into the intake. I never had issues with, with, in between shifts, stalling or backfiring. Never had issues with that running a low PSI. The only thing you may have to do with this, and I did with my other one, was actually crush it just a little bit. Put it in a vise and crush it, because at lower PSI was possibly, it may have been just the one that I had was leaking just a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So let me turn this over. The other thing that's big about this, no matter what intercooler you use, people are always running into issues with the Y-pipe. So the stock Y-pipe will come out right where my finger is, pretty much. It'll come out about right here. And in our location, because it's in a stock WRX location, but our throttle body is not in the stock location, we need it to actually come down a little bit. And I didn't like custom this pipe or anything. This is actually a brand called G+. You can find this on eBay, and I got it because the reviews were terrible, saying that for a stock WRX intercooler, it was much too long, meaning people were cutting it here and here to get it to fit, to bring this piece up, which is perfect because I want it to be long. We want it to be long because most people, what they'll want to do is cut the Y pipe, and then they'll put in, because I have it here, they'll put like something like this in. And I originally did something like that on my first build, where I cut the Y pipe, put this in. That stock Y pipe is crap to begin with, so it's kind of like that hard plastic, kind of hard to work with anyway. And then you get like a pipe for like $3, and then kind of make your own, like elongate yourself there. But I strongly recommend just getting this. This was $30. That'll help you quite a bit. Okay, that's the first tip. Let's go into turbo. Okay, so this is a TD04. I recommend a TD04 for this build. You could jam a VF39 or like a VF48 or something in there. I just wouldn't do it. I mean, again, I ran 6 PSI for the first 8 months on my previous build, and then I ran 10 PSI for about a year, and then I sold the car about in 2017. It's still running now. So that was it had 230,000 miles on it when I put the turbo on it. It has over 300 now. Again, running 10 PSI for the last nearly 70,000 miles. And it's the motor is just a tank. So, I mean, again, I wouldn't run over 10 psi. I don't even think you can with the math. I didn't even try because I was monitoring air fuel ratio and making sure that it was staying around low 11s, like 11.2. This was like the lean as it was going. So I would recommend a TD04, starting with 6, 5 or 6, and then going with 10 at the highest, at the absolute highest. So you can make a boost controller if you have a lower. You can make a boost controller for like $5, but that's a different story. So okay, so here you have a TD04 wastegate boost, hose right to the wastegate. The wastegate here, I believe it's a 6 psi wastegate. It may be a 10. Either way, I know that the car can handle 10. And if it isn't a 10, what I'll do is I'll just take or a 6. I'll just take these bolts off, or excuse me, I'll take the C clip off here, and basically use like a hard spring. Like you can just get like a kind of a loose spring. And what will happen is it'll cause the wastegate to open sooner, letting exhaust gas escape, limiting the amount of boost. And basically, based off the spring and where I'm putting it, that would lower my actual boost pressure. So, but eventually I'll probably end up running 10 anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. When you get one of these turbos, you should be able to get them for pretty much. If you're paying more than $100 for these, something's wrong. Like someone's trying to really screw you over on that. I'm in the Northwest, so things are a little bit more easier to come by. But I picked this up for $80, and I was like, that's a little bit pricey. Normally I get these for like 50. If you're getting it for less than 50, just check to make sure that there's no shaft play, like in and out. Obviously, if there's any in and out shaft play, just walk away because it's more expensive to rebuild it at that point. Because I mean, you can get a rebuild kit for like 30 or 50 bucks, but I mean that's the cost of the turbo right now. So, and shaft play left to right, laterally it should be minimal. This has none, so I'm not really concerned with that. So that's the turbo. This is the other tip that I see people running into a lot. Okay, so this would be the elbow that would go on, and basically it's going to come off and go this way. And I see people doing this all the time. So in the stock WRX location, you have people who are like, the turbo is going to end up being like right about here. It's going to connect it, but lower, obviously, so it's going to be pushed down. And people will use an elbow like this because they have to. You can't go underneath. You can't go underneath because the power steering pumps in the way, and plus there's just a litany of stuff. And even if there was, like the WRX does that, it's just terrible going underneath. It's so difficult to get the inlet, remove it at all. So you can't go underneath anyway. So people they immediately jet like out, which is right. You want to get out as soon as possible. So they'll either jam this, like, I mean, it'll be like torqued, jammed, like cut. And if you ever want to move it, you can't. Like it's there for life, and it's just pressed up against the intake manifold. Difficult to move. So I found this in my last build. Look at the width on this. So this would be coming off the turbo like this. This is called a Cobra head. This is called a Cobra head coupler here. You can just Google Cobra head. I think a couple company makes them. This is from, I think, siliconehoses.com, I believe I got this from. So this is a 2 to 2.5. You can see that because the bend is so severe, 90 degrees, what they do to compensate for the dimensions inside is bow out. So the same airflow is capable. It's just kind of diverted all around. You can see how it kind of beefs out there. Let's see how it fits on here. Perfect fit. I used that before. This allowed me to not only not have to cut anything, or like I had an extra like nearly an inch, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're playing, like you can take this on and off easy, the whole intake on and off easy. This was like $15, and you're gonna spend like $8 or something, or $10 on this anyway. So you might as well just buy this. Believe me, this will come in really handy. Even if you don't need a severe vent, even if you're like, it's nothing, this will make your life a lot easier. So I'd strongly recommend getting that. While we're on that topic, let's show the intake as a whole. I'm gonna go from there. So this would be how you do the intake, because most people don't go into that. And I'll show, like, this is just an exhaust piece. You can get a prettier piece of metal. I do this very cheaply. This is $3 from AutoZone, and then this would be a little bit more pricey. I think that was like $10. This is a 2.5. to 3-inch. And the reason this is 3 inches is because this is what the MAF is going to connect to. So again, from turbo starting. The reason I use this metal piece is because then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these adapters in. So these different adapters are going to be used for the intake pieces that need to be added to this. So basically I'll just drill holes in and then just screw those pieces in and then apply some JB Weld or some silicone at that point. So now that you see this setup here, we'll talk about the intake. So again, that 3-inch adapter is going to come to here. So basically, again, all this is going to be garbage. And then this from here will be used and we'll attach to this right there. So basically we'll start and just go boop right to here. So you'll have a metal hose about right here. And we have 3 lines to connect, 3 different lines. First, idle air control valve. Kind of, let me get a little better light on there. That's this guy. And because the turbo is going to be sitting like right here, you're going to have to jet up immediately. So it comes out and goes all the way over the intake. You're going to have to elbow. What I do is I elbow up and then I elbow this way. I don't want the hose to do the bends. You can find a molded hose maybe, but so elbow and then elbow this way. And then again, the metal's going to be sitting about right here. Then it's a 3/4 inch hose. I use a 3/4 inch nipple and put that in. That's by itself. So a lot of people will try to connect like all this with like one nipple because they're like, it's all going to the intake. I strongly recommend you don't do that. Just because different things need vacuum and you could actually be pushing a positive pressure into some of these lines. So like this line right here, PCV crankcase vent down there, that's going to be also a little bit more difficult because it's kind of way down there. Kind of see it connecting to the actual block down there. So this could get positive pressure. So like this line that goes right to here, what I'm going to do is that line's going to get its own as well. So the reason I do that is because again, this could get positive pressure. So I want that going directly back into the intake. I'm pushing air into the intake. If I teed all these together, then possibly I could be pushing air into any one of these lines that requires vacuum, which most people, you're not going to get big issues with that, but that's where you may get those little idle issues or a little bit of stuttering or bucking, and people are like, why is it not running quite right? That's probably the issue that you're seeing there. And then, so that's the second one, would be this line. Would again, it comes out right here. You would just kind of bring that up and bring it over here with another nipple. And then the third one would be the vents for the valve covers. And I already kind of have something set up to use something like this. This one's going to the passenger side vent. This one's going to the driver's side vent. And then this hose in the middle would be the one that would kind of go back to the intake. It's not in the right position now. It's going to go way over here. This piece is going to end up like sitting like somewhere over here. But yeah, that's pretty much what you need there. That's the only line that should be teed. I mean, it's teed already, and they're both doing the same function, just venting from the valve covers. So that's those tips and tricks. So now we have the turbo placement, the intake, coolant, oil. So now you're thinking like, what about the exhaust? Well, how are you going to get the turbo in the location that you want? So first, let me show you from the turbo back, and then we'll talk about how I'm getting the turbo in that location to begin with. Let me move this turbo out of the way so I'm not just tripping over it. Okay. So first, I went and I bought 2 down pipes. I bought one catted one here, and the cat is actually, you hear it kind of shaking in there. The cat's shot, like, and then I bought a cat that I'm gonna shove in here for $50 on Amazon. So this was $100. Cat was $50. It's gonna be, and then I'll get it welded in. That should be, I mean, that's like, I'm not gonna do that right away, but that should be a total of about $200. Catted downpipes go for WRX go for like, the lowest is like $380 I saw on eBay, the absolute lowest. And most of the time it's gonna be like $500-600, even for a used one. So, I mean, I have that. And then this one is the one I'm gonna put on right away. This is a catless one. $30 for this little fella. So you should be able to, I mean, you should be able to find those for pretty cheap, like under $100 should be for a catless downpipe. You should be able to find for like 50 for a used one, so that's cheap. Then over here, that's an Sti Mid-Pipe, like the stock one, and then I have the Sti axle back already on there. This is on the Sti axle back on like a stock GC8 or GF8. You just need to elongate the holes. I see a lot of people doing crazy stuff to get these to work, but it's really not that big of a deal. But either way, so that axle back will stay where it's at, and then I'll just have this mid-pipe, down-pipe, and that'll get me from the turbo back. So now, and this is the big one, how do we get the turbo into the WRX stock location? I told you this was a single port exhaust. So you have a couple options. You custom weld an Uppipe, which is what I see most people do. I'm not a welder. I can't do that. I've done everything. I've had 12 Subarus, bunch of swaps. Haven't bought a welder, haven't mastered welding yet. I've only had to get, if you can believe it, 2 things welded in the 12 Subarus I had. I did a lot of custom stuff. I try to, like, I mean, when I say custom, I mean like, because these cars are Legos, you can move from one car to the next. So with a single port, you can either custom weld your own Uppipe, which I can't do, or you can buy the Subaru stuff. So the Subaru stuff, if you're not aware, goes from the single port or dual port exhaust header and wraps around the cross member and kind of brings it up and back to where the WRX location would be. It's not the WRX location though, it's close. What it does is it puts it kind of slanted in the car, like where the WRX location would be. Let's say it's straight, it's more slanted like this, so it's point. So you don't have to really make that huge bend with the intake coming off, but you do need to either buy his downpipe for another $200. So it's $200 for the Uppipe and then $200 for the downpipe. And then once you're done with that, you still need to get something custom welded from his downpipe to either a GC Catback or a WRX Catback, because there's just that gap there, and there's no pipe that he makes to do that, which to me is infuriating. People tell me to buy that pipe all the time for this build, and I'm like, that's not. If I'm going to have to get something custom welded, why would I spend $400 and still get something custom welded when what I can do is, like most people are doing, custom weld the Uppipe and then use all WRX stuff that I can easily swap out. Like, so if I can swap out a downpipe at any point for catted to non-catted, swap out catbacks, no big deal. Like, it's not, with that stuff, I'm kind of stuck, at least with a downpipe, if not more. So that infuriates me, because it's going to end up being like $500-600 just for a pipe and downpipe, easily $500-600 if you go the route. So I'm talking to someone right now. Actually, they're going to have the pipe done this weekend. I talked with a company that most people are aware of. I'm not going to really name drop now, just because I don't have the piece. I will have it this weekend, and I will post pictures. But they're going to be mass producing an Uppipe that will run from the stock header location, like where it ends, right past the cross member for single port and dual port, and then it goes right to the WRX location in stainless. That way, you just buy that Uppipe, and then you can use all WRX stuff. See, no more customizing it, no more exhaust shop is needed to do this build at all, ever. Like, I'm sick of like having to weld stuff or bring in a third party. So again, I'll post a link when I have that. It's going to be $200. I already paid for it, but again, the Subaru one is $200 plus the downpipe is $200 plus you need to get stuff welded. So again, it's like $500. This is $200, and then you can pick up a turbo back from a WRX. Like, even if you go pricey on it, I mean, you could go up to like $400, but that's like a nice turbo back. I got cheap, crappy downpipe for $30, and that Sti Catback was free. So my turbo back in effect cost me $30, and then I'm buying that Uppipe for $200. So I mean, I got Uppipe, downpipe, and Catback for $230. you may not be able to get it for that cheap, but you should be able to do it for about, I mean, the Turbovac should be $200 for you. If you're going catless, catted, obviously it's going to be more pricey. So that's like the big reveal there. It's like the big giveaway. That Uppipe should be very helpful for people doing this build going forward. I guess I can end the video showing the car in its entirety. It's a 97 Subaru Outback Sport, obviously. Plasti dipped gray with WRX wheels and some coilovers just to lower it. The Plasti dip is not pretty, to say the least, but the car was a couple different colors when I bought it. I just wanted to kind of make it uniform for my sake and my neighbors. So yeah, it's that's the car here. And the last thing I'll show is what I did in the interior to kind of get ready for the swap. Pretty much stock in here. Besides, I think these are legacy seats that came with these. They look to be legacy seats. So this is the only other thing that I've done to get ready for the turbo swap. We already talked about the oil pressure gauge. This is mechanical. It's a Bosch oil pressure gauge. So yeah, that reads very well. Air fuel, definitely going to need that. You want to monitor your air fuel. I'm monitoring it now to see kind of where it's running in A. I can kind of, I haven't really run it on an NA motor. Kind of weird to see it like mid 12s, 13. I'm just used to something lower, like a 10 in terms of, for turbo. And then this is a manual boost gauge. You don't need this as turbo timer. There's debate on turbo timers. I don't really think they're needed. I am more of a functional guy. This is more of a form thing. Like, hey, my car's still on when I'm walking away. That's not the big reason why I have these. I've had these on pretty much every car. They're $40. This is a DC2 Blitz turbo timer, and the reason I like this one is because it doubles as a boost gauge. So again, mechanical. This is actually electronic. So this is $40. You can hook this up, and it holds peak boosts, and that's big for like if I want to like see on a run. Like obviously you can't stare down at your boost gauge the entire time. I can just go back to peak and see what the peak was for something. So that's very convenient. Okay, so that's pretty much it. The only thing that I didn't go into is fuel. So we've been into you're forcing more air into the engine. You need to fuel to compensate. So on my previous build, I did use a Warbro fuel pump, like the 255, like the standard one. I have one like that I could install. I got it for cheap. It was like $30. But I'm going to try this with just the stock EJ22 fuel pump. I believe it has enough to handle it. I think it's like 160 liters is what I bought a new one, a stock replacement, and I believe it's like 160. I know it's not 255 like a Warbro is, but I think a Warbro is overkill. Like you use a WRX one, and a WRX one's around 200. So that I think will be good with. Again, so I'm not doing anything fuel related. Nothing. No engine management. Nothing. No FMU. None. I did none of that in my previous build as well. None of that. So basically, I may need to install a fuel pump, but again, with the phase 1 motors, you should not need to do anything fuel related. And you should be able to handle 10 psi with low 11 air fuel ratio, and I never experienced knock. So that is pretty much it. That's everything. The thing that I can go into is I refer to the phase 1 motor a lot, and everyone may not be familiar with what a phase 1 is. Some confusion there. I was even confused for a little bit. So everything 97 and prior is a phase 1 motor. I was previously referring to phase 1 motors as the 95s and below because they were non-interference motors, and that to me was like what defined a phase 1. But there's two different versions of the phase 1. So from 95 prior is a phase 1 with dual port heads for the exhaust, so you can use WRX stuff if you wanted, if you notch the cross member, and non-interference. So if the timing belt snapped or you're changing the timing belt and you just throw around the cam pulleys, you're not going to bend valves by hitting pistons. The 96, 97 phase 1s are interference. This is how they differ from the 95s and prior. They're interference, so you can bend valves if the timing belt snaps. They're
single port in terms of the exhaust, so single port coming out of the exhaust. And thirdly, they have a slightly higher compression ratio. Like I think they're like 9.7, and the 95s and prior are 9.5. So still lower in terms of, for an NA motor, not like an 8 or anything like that, but so it's like a 9.7. The phase 2, which is 98 and above, those are all map based motors. So there's MAF and then there's map based. The MAF motor is a little bit easier to tune for, and the map is going to require a little bit more in terms of voltage clamps. And it's going to be a higher compression ratio as well. It's going to be, I think, 10 for those is the compression ratio. So you can do this on a phase 2. I haven't done it on a phase 2. I just know the phase 1s are pretty much bulletproof in terms of what they can handle. So I will update the channel with my build video. I should be able to do that later this week. I'm hoping, if I have get the Uppipe. I'm just waiting on that Uppipe. So, but if you guys have any questions or anything like that, feel free to add to the comments below, or and I'll be able to answer those. I should be able to. Thanks for watching.